Welcome back, Toastmasters and guests. We are now in the second portion of our meeting, the prepared speech portion of our meeting. Today, we have two presentations for you. The first is by our very own Toastmaster, Angela, who is an avid blogger, a published author, an English teacher, and of course, a very proficient Toastmaster. Toastmaster Angela presentation today would be about speaking professionally. And her project, learn to recognize popular Chinese and Japanese name. Learn to recognize popular Chinese and Japanese name, Toastmaster Angela.
Thank you very much, President Edward and Toastmaster Edward and Timer Edward. Fellow Toastmasters and friends, visitors, Toastmasters to be. That's you, Carl.
Thank you.
I want to tell you not just about Chinese and Japanese, but about all languages. One of the first problems you get when you're in a Toastmasters meeting or any meeting, or if you're a teacher and you're faced with a class of 30 pupils, is how do you remember everybody's names? Now, there are techniques for remembering people's names. You can think of a way of remembering them, and when you're introducing yourself, it's a help if you introduce yourself with a memory aid. So I say to people, I'm Angela, like an angel. Don't know if they're convinced or if it works, but people do seem to remember my name. Sometimes I say, I'm not related to the actress, but she does lovely publicity for my name. When it comes to learning and understanding foreign names, it's very important, especially in Toastmasters, because you are often asked to vote on which of 4 or 5 speakers gave the best table topic, and you have to remember whose name was which. Now, it's very easy if somebody has an alliterative name, like Mike Ma. That's very good. That's easy to remember. It's like mama, but it's Mike Ma. It gets much easier if you know the meaning of names. And I have made a complete list of about 40 different languages, and I'm building up a list of names, and I'm going to go through them. Now, I could ask you to just pick on the names you want to know about, but I thought I'd just run through half a dozen of them. And if I get tired, or if you have an urge to ask about a particular language, put your hand up. But I'll start with 3 or 4 of them. Now, Chinese ones, for example, Lee Kuan Yew. Now, the first thing you need to know about Chinese is that the family name or the clan name comes first. You might think this is a bit odd if you're from England, because we have the first name first, the same in America and most European countries. However, in the old days, in the British public schools, which are private schools in America, you would call people by their surname. So you can get used to that, but it's important to get it right, because on 2 or 3 occasions, my husband and I have gone to either check onto a flight or check into a hotel. And my husband said, my family name is Sharrett, Mr. Trevor Sharrett. They've looked down and they haven't found a Mr. Sharrett. And if I'm bright, I can read upside down. And if I'm bold, I can say, may I have a look? And then you find something like they've got him down as Mr. Trevor. And then I get addressed as Mrs. Trevor. It can get very confusing. So you need to know that in which Asian countries they put the family name first. Now, those of you who've been here a long time will be fine and happy and dandy with that. But just remember that people who arrive from abroad and they're the first time off a plane, they don't know that and they will get confused. And similarly, as somebody in a new job is going to get confused too. Now, let me give you some good ones that you might find useful to remember. For example, Lee Kuan Yew, Lee is a very common name, and very common names are Li, Lim, Sheng, and Wang. Wang means king. So I have a friend called Wang. I had a lot of trouble trying to remember what his name was. And then I realized he was actually a Mr. King. He is Wang. That made it a whole lot easier. He likes to think that he is important. He thinks of himself as the king of the group. So when he walks in, I say, "Hello, Wang." I know it, I've got it. And for the first 6 meetings, I couldn't get his name. As soon as I got the memory aid, I knew it. Now, I have another friend, and her name is Shan Shan. I had difficult to remember Susan, Swan, Shan, Wan, Shin, Shan. I couldn't remember it. Then I discovered that Shan meant mountain. And plurals in Asian names are repeated. I think that applies to Chinese, probably Japanese, Indonesian as well. So Jalan, Jalan is a plural, and Shan, Shan is mountain, mountain, or mountains. So now it's very easy for me to remember that her name is Shan Shan, which is mountain, mountain. And she's a big lady. So I just look at her and I think, Shan Shan. Very easy to remember. Now let's look at some others which are easy to remember once you know the trick. English names. Son on the end of a name means that somebody is somebody's son. And this was the same all over the world, particularly in Europe, so that Jack's son becomes Jackson. The family name becomes Jackson. William's son becomes Williamson. So the family name, the next generation is Williamson. And John's son becomes Johnson. So the family name Johnson and Johnson dates back to 2 people who were called John. David, Davison, Jack, Jackson, James, Jameson, and the Smithsonian Museum, Smith's son. And Thompson Road, somewhere way back, there was a Thomas who had a son. Thomas is Hebrew meaning, or Greek meaning twin. Now let's go on to biblical names. Oh no, before we do that, let's look at names, surnames, and what they were. Most common English surname is Smith. And a smith or a blacksmith was a man who used to hammer iron and make horseshoes and all sorts of things around the house. You also had silversmiths and goldsmiths, from which we get the names silver and gold. So that's 4 names that we have that you recognize: black, silver, gold, and smith. Mason used to hammer stones. Baker used to bake cakes. Butcher used to cut up meat. All names for jobs which people had. And the same applies to other languages. For example, very common German name is Schmidt. Schmidt is German for smith. So his father or grandfather or great-grandfather would have been a blacksmith. Now let's move on to Hebrew names. Once you get them, they're very easy to remember and very often come across. For example, Baruch means blessed. Benjamin, very common name. Ben is a son. Benjamin is son of my right hand. Ben is a son. And if you read an annotated Bible, it gives you these 2 names in the book which tells the story of the patriarchs, the fathers. So the mother said, Reuben, see, I had a son because it's very important to have a son in olden times. And Benjamin, son of my right hand. A few others, for example, David means beloved. And it also comes up in other languages. In Arabic, it's Dawood. And for years, my doctor was Dr. Dawood, and I never realized that he was actually Dr. David, as far as I was concerned. And once I remembered that, it was much easier to remember his name. Now, to go back to Hebrew, two very common names for God were El and Yah or Yo. From these, we get names such as Elizabeth. You get both of them together in Joel, two names for God. Then there are some Yiddish names like Moses became Moshe, and the Jewish immigrants to London's East End changed their names to be more English sounding. So the Moses brothers became Moss Brothers, which is a very big chain of tailors in the UK. Now let me move on to Aramaic. Aramaic is related to Hebrew and Arabic. Aramaic was the language spoken by Jesus. It was the everyday language. Smart people might have spoken Greek, but the ordinary people spoke Aramaic. Aramaic, amazingly, is still spoken by groups of people in modern day Israel and in Syria and other countries. And the Jewish wedding certificate is still written in Aramaic because people haven't moved on with the times, and it was originally written in Aramaic so that people could understand what it said. Nobody speaks Aramaic anymore, but the rabbis insist that it's traditional and that's the way it's done. But the modern people put it in English as well, or in Hebrew as well, according to which country they're in. But they still like to have it in Aramaic. Now, let's move on. Arabic, Allah. Allah, El, it's the L and the vowel with it. And Abdullah means servant of good, of God. A very common name is Fatima, who is a relative of Muhammad. And Muhammad, all Muslims are called Muhammad, or the vast majority, or Ali. That is why so many of them are called that, but they don't want to be called that. They want to be called by their second name, not because they're hiding the fact that they're Muslims, but because all the other Muslims are called by the same name and it gets confusing. Now, Greek names, you often find a name that ends with Opulos. Again, that means son of. Now, to go back to the Irish and the Scottish, how many of you have got Scottish or Irish friends or colleagues or ancestors or people in your country with their names? O'Connor comes from of, so you're descended from the Connors. And Fitz is also descended from that group. So that's why you get Fitzwilliam from the William group, Fitzgerald from the Gerald group, O'Connor from the Connors group. And of course, McDonald's is Mac from the Donald group. Easy to remember, isn't it? Okay, and the Greeks, if you see os on the end, it's probably the son of. So something, it looks ever so long and complicated. As soon as you take the os off the end, you find it's simply son of. Now, if you go up to Russia and all the East European names, you will find that they've got ski and of and over. And again, this is a suffix or an ending. A prefix is at the beginning, a suffix is at the ending. The ending of the name tells you that that person is the son of somebody or other. So Alicia Markova, the dancer, Markova, she was over from Mark. So her grandfather was Mark, and she was Markova, daughter of Mark, or granddaughter of Mark, or great-granddaughter of Mark. Now, in some of the languages, the male and female endings are different. So you might find in a language that ovo or o is a man and a is a woman. So that, for example, in English, you often get Maria, but in Italian, you get Mario. So Maria is a woman and Mario is a man. In English, we have the name Frank. In Spain, they have Franco, which is a man. Now let's look at Latin. My name's Angela. Does anyone know what Angela means? Angela means messenger of God. I didn't realize I was so important. Clara means clear. Leo means lion. And there are lots of names which are related to lion. Leo, Leon, Lev. They're all related to lion in some way. Now, a few more interesting ones. Maxim or Maximus is the greatest. So Augustus Maximus is Augustus the Great. Now, you might think Augustus, Julius, who cares about these old Romans? We do. Every time you say the word July or August, you're using their names. Their names were given to our months. July after Julius Caesar, and Augustus gave his name to the month of August. A couple more useful ones from the Latin. Paulus actually means small. So my grandfather Paul was small. And Shehan Paul, your name means small. Did you know that? No,
I didn't. That was great.
Shehan Paul, Paul who is not small. Paul small, Paul Saul small. Oh well. And Vivius Lively gives us our name Vivian. We use the word vivacious all the time. I never thought that Vivian came from Vivius, meaning lively. So learn a bit of Latin and learn some Latin names. And you'll remember that Shehan Paul is called Shehan Paul, but he's not small, he's Paul. So there we remember another name, another useful name. Carl, now Carl with a K. Can we go on to German names? Where are the German names? German names, yes. Carl in English would be Charles.
Right.
Spelled all sorts of ways with a K or a C, and in English CH. Carl sounds awfully foreign and hard to remember as soon as you think that it's actually Charles, but easy to remember because you can write it much faster. All you need is a K instead of the CH. How handy to be called Carl. You can sign your name much more quickly, write your name much more quickly, type it in when you're doing your texting much more quickly. Ever so good, very handy. Now, what else have we got from German? Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. Schwarz, black. Kopf, head. Black head meant black hair rather than a black head, which means something totally different in English, means a black spot on your face. So Schwarzkopf, easy to remember that one. Other names to remember: Nicholas becomes Niklas, Niklas. Blau as a surname is Blue. I had a friend called Carl Blau. He was actually Charles Blue in English. Once I remembered that, I could remember his name much more easily. Jacobi. You may remember an actor called Jacobi. He was in a film called I, Claudius. Jacobi means son of Jacob. Another good one to remember, man with two N's is just man. So klein man, klein is small. Eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little small music for the night. Kleinman is a small man. And Schneider is a tailor. And of course, a tailor, if your name is Faye Taylor or Elizabeth Taylor, her grandfather might have been a tailor, or he might have been Schneider and changed his name to Taylor when he came to England. And Zimmerman, another common name, is carpenter, and Weber is weaver. So you know a lot of names from a lot of languages. Do you have any questions or any languages you want to ask about? Or anything you want to tell me? I throw it open to questions. If there are no questions, I'll go on to Father Claus, Father Christmas. No questions? Right, for a bit of fun to end on Father Christmas. In England, he's called Father Christmas. In French, he's called Père Noël. Père is father. Santa Claus comes up again, Papa Noël. But the Russians call him Ded Moroz, which is Grandfather Frost. So that one is different. Now, there are some more obscure ones which you might remember. Mike, if you come to Bradle Heights Advanced on Wednesday, you will find a girl from Burma, and her name is Kiki, Kyi. Aung San Suu Kyi, that's a very common name. So once you know that Kiki is part of Aung San Suu Kyi's name, it's easier to remember. So have fun with names. Please let me know if there are any names which you think I should know about, and I'll add them to my list. Back to you, Toastmaster of the evening, Edward.
Excellent job, Toastmaster Angela, and most informative. I did not know half the information that you presented to us today, which makes our good friend Lee Butley names all the more clearer to me. I was always puzzled why her name was Lee Butley, but now I understand perfectly why. Excellent job, Toastmaster Angela. And now for our second presentation.
I wanted to make a clarification with one of the languages there, which is very interesting, which is Taiwanese. So the history is very interesting. So Taiwanese comes from Fujian province, and the area of Fujian province called Xiamen, which is where all the Fujianese people left from about 200 or 300 years ago.
Wrong
Yeah,
number,
that,
sorry.
I just wanted to mention that Taiwanese is not the actual name of the language, but it gets confused. It's actually the Minlan dialect from Fujian province. And in Singapore, they call it Hokkien, but it's really the Minlan dialect from Xiamen, China, in Fujian province, Minlan dialect of Fujian province, which went to Taiwan, and then they use the term Taiwanese when it's really Fukienese, and in Singapore they call it Hokkien. Just a little clarification with Taiwanese, because it's actually Minlan dialect.
Thank you for that. I'll add that to my knowledge base. Thank
So
you.
in
Yeah, it's useful for Singapore because lots of people here speak not only Mandarin, but they speak Cantonese, and they speak this Minlan dialect, or Hokkien. You hear the term Hokkien all the time, but it's actually Minlan dialect from Xiamen in Fujian province.
so
China.
in Thailand, in Taiwan, is it not Chinese Mandarin the main language?
No,
Taiwan.
it's the official language. It's the official language of Taiwan as well as China, but 95% of the island speak this Minlan dialect from the north to the south. They all speak it. And Mandarin is the national language, but there's a dialect which is called this Minlan dialect. Just a clarification.
Okay, wow, that's something.
It
And
was
also, Angela,
Mandarin- yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
No, I was just saying Mandarin was brought to Taiwan in 1950 with the Taiwanese, with the government, yeah.
Angela, about the Father Christmas, so don't you call Santa Claus for Santa Claus in England?
No, because Santa Claus, Santa is basically Italian, and saints and Italian were
Santa Claus.
pushed out
Santa,
because it's
yeah.
too associated with the Roman Catholics, and Henry VIII made himself head of the church so he could marry and get divorced because he didn't have a son. So he had to get a divorce from his wife. It's a long story. So he
Wow.
separated himself
Interesting.
from the popes. So as part of, we're nothing to do with Europe, nothing to do with the Pope, nothing to do with the Roman Catholics. We are English. We do not have Santa Claus or Santa Claus. We have Father Christmas, which is English.
Okay, so
So
they had a
idea.
different church back then, not the Roman Catholic Church. They had an
They
English
started,
church.
they started with the
England.
Roman Catholic, but King Henry wanted a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, his
Yes.
first wife.
Yes.
And to get that divorce, he had to form his own church, the Anglican Church. So they did away with all the Christian tradition and remake them English.
Oh, that's how Anglican came into picture. We know Anglican,
Correct.
but we don't know how it came to picture. And also, we know the Church of Scotland as well. But I
Yeah.
thought so.
If you
Roman
look-
Catholicism
just-
is not famous in UK.
Just look up the Protestants. The Protestants were protesting against the
The
Catholic.
Pope,
Yes, against the Pope of that era.
Martin
And
Luther.
it comes every few centuries of people in some religion are against the government of that religion and want to start something new. And this is what
Mhm.
Henry VIII did. But what nobody tells you in school is that Catherine must have reached menopause, couldn't have any more children, and he wanted a son because for succession, so there wouldn't be a civil war.
Right.
So
Okay.
he had to get a divorce, but the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce because that would have upset the Spaniards who are living next door to the Italians and closer to us and the English. So the Pope wanted to be friends with the Spaniards and not upset the Spaniards and the Portuguese, who were all his neighbors. So he wouldn't give Henry the divorce from Catherine of Aragon from Spain. So Henry said, look, I've got the sea between me and you. I've got to do what I want. And to go back to my names, in Ireland, the Roman Catholics call their children Mary, and the Protestants call their children Elizabeth. So you can tell if someone is a Roman Catholic, and I didn't know that till I met an Irishman. I just thought girls were called Mary if they were Catholic. He said, no, no, no. If you're called Mary, you're a Roman Catholic from Southern Ireland. And if you're called Elizabeth, you're from Northern Ireland, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You're one of the English lot.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there you are. Anyway, sorry to have taken up all your time.
Wow, that's quite really Nail. I learned that for the first time. So Anglican Church is the popular one, not the Roman Catholic Church in
It's not
UK.
just popular, it's official.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Over to you, Toastmaster today. Sorry about that.
That is why Prince Charles, why they don't want Prince Charles's wife to be queen. It's written into the constitution that the king and queen must not be Roman Catholic, because it would undo the history.
Most informative, but we must keep the meeting moving. We must keep the meeting moving. For our second manual presentation, the introduction will be done by our very own Toastmaster, Shehan.
Thank you very much, Toastmaster today. Our second speaker would be Toastmaster Edward Young, our beloved club president. Toastmaster Edward is an IT professional who lives in Belize, Central America. He enjoys public speaking, cycling, playing chess, and RPGs. So he will be doing his project on evaluation, researching and presenting. And the purpose of this project is for the member to learn to review basic research method and present a well-organized, well-researched speech on any topic. Again, the purpose of this project is for the member to learn or review basic research methods and present a well-organized, well-researched speech on any topic. Ladies and gentlemen, Toastmaster Edward Young, the crisis in Belize sugar industry. The crisis in Belize sugar industry, Toastmaster Edward Young.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, could be said about the sugar industry in Belize. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Toastmasters and most welcome guests. The crisis in Belize sugar industry could be said to stem from greed. But before we get into it, let's understand the importance of Belize sugar industry. In Belize, our economy is based on tourism, sugar, and agriculture, in that order. Thanks to the pandemic, our tourism industry was decimated, like most tourism industry throughout the world. So 60% of the economy of Belize went away, poof, thanks to the pandemic. It is just now making a comeback. Last week, we had 6 cruise ships in our harbor with 4,800 tourists getting off those ships, venturing into Belize, whether it's tours, hotels, restaurants. So there is a return to the tourism industry. However, our second most important industry, the citrus industry. The northern 2 districts of Belize, Corozal and Orange Walk, the livelihood of these populace highly depends on the sugar industry. The sugar industry is responsible for more than 25% of our economy. With the milling of the sugar cane being done by ASR BSI, a multinational company that in Belize, they have an agreement with the cane growers. Now, the agreement with the cane growers expired last October, just before the general election in Belize last November. The main topic of concern was to renegotiate the cane price. How much would ASR, BSI, the millers, pay the cane farmers for the cane crop? Now, the argument is the price of sugar around the world is going down. Therefore, the millers cannot pay the cane farmers as much as they did in the past. The cane farmers find this unacceptable because they believe the millers must find new venues, new avenues to export the sugar to sell the sugar to, or come up with new crops or streams of revenue so that the selling price would not be hurt. This is the argument. Currently in Belize, there is a standoff. The cane season for milling starts in early December. By the 7th, the 10th of December, the milling of sugarcane in Belize normally starts. And this would go on until April, May of the following year. We are at the 31st of December, and the milling of sugarcane in Belize hasn't started. This means that we will lose on foreign exchange from the export of sugar. We will not be able to retrieve enough foreign exchange for our budget, which will be read in April. Our budget in Belize normally reads in April. That determines how much public servants get paid, how much we spend on infrastructure, and with a large amount of our revenue dependent on the goods such as sugar, our second most powerful economic earner for the country, in stagnant, stationary, not moving, nothing is happening, we will be in a greater deficit. The Prime Minister has stepped in. He has negotiated with the millers and the cane farmers to proceed with the old arrangement until a new agreement can start. But the concession that he had to give to ASR, BSI, the millers, is that they will enjoy a tax break for another 3 years. Whatever equipment they bring into the country, they will not pay taxes on. This will further hurt the economy of Belize. Why? Because we get revenue for our government on taxes like every other country in the world. And when big corporations bring in equipment, they pay a paltry 5% on equipment. 5% on whatever equipment they bring in. Now they will not even be paying that 5% to the government, just so that they can start to mill sugar. The cane farmers and population of Belize believe we are being held ransom. Why is this? Well, the milling is done by a multinational corporation. This multinational corporation has no real ties to Belize. They do not care if our roads are built, if the cane farmers collect a payment for their crop, which they use to pay their mortgages, their children's school fees, put food on the table. All they see is the bottom line, a greater share dividend for their shareholders by paying as less as possible for the cane. The cane farmers believe that they are being exploited because they believe the value of their crop is greater than what the millers are offering to pay. This is the crisis in Belize sugar industry. It is a stalemate between the growers and the millers. And this stalemate results in loss of revenue for the government and the entire country of Belize. Currently, if we do not resolve this issue, and if we are not able to export sugar in the quantities that we are normally able to export, the foreign reserve received from the exportation of sugar will be severely decreased, which means we will have less money in our central bank for the purchase of other needed goods. Our economy of Belize, which is highly dependent on tourism, most of our food is imported into Belize. Most of the equipment we need to carry on day-to-day activities is imported into Belize. If we do not have sufficient foreign exchange, we cannot move forward. Again, the crisis in Belize is at a stalemate. The sugar crisis is at a stalemate. However, there is a possibility that milling will start within the first week of January, come 2022, as the Prime Minister has negotiated that they will start to mill at the old rate, granted that he awards ASR BSI a 5% for the next 3 years on their import of equipment. They will not be paying the government that 5%. That will halt the stalemate and move Belize forward as it relates to the sugar crisis. Toastmasters. That was our second manual presentation today. With that, we break for 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, so that the evaluators can finish their evaluation, and then we return with the evaluation portion of our meeting.